Have you ever stopped and wondered why more and more women today are choosing to walk through life on their own? Not drifting, not lost, not waiting. Choosing. No boyfriend, no partner, no urgent search for connection, just themselves. In a world obsessed with pairing, labeling, and explaining every human bond, this choice looks suspicious, unsettling, even subversive. People assume she must be lonely, or wounded, or incapable of finding someone. But what if none of those assumptions come close to the truth? What if the reason she walks alone is not because she's empty, but because she's full? What if her solitude is not a gap in her life, but a frontier she crossed willingly? Because a woman who chooses solitude isn't slipping through the cracks, she's stepping out of the pattern. And that choice doesn't come with applause, social approval, or tidy explanations. It comes with silence, with space, with a kind of inner authority that many people never learn to hold. She's not detached. She's discerning. She's not unloving. She's unwilling to pour herself into hands that tremble with uncertainty. There's something disruptive about a woman who does not require a romantic bond to feel anchored. Something quietly revolutionary. Something that makes people shift in their seats. Because when a woman realizes she doesn't need rescuing, the old script dissolves. The story of dependency, sacrifice, and emotional compromise loses its grip, and the truth rises. Some men don't know how to engage with a woman who doesn't subordinate her life to their presence, and some women are still learning how to fully inhabit that version of themselves. Carl Jung once wrote that the things we refuse to face within ourselves become shadows that follow us. And in many ways, these solitary women embody a cultural shadow, the part of the feminine psyche that society has repressed for centuries, the part that is sovereign, self-defined, and internally whole. They represent a possibility that lies within many, but is embraced by few. They don't shout their value into the world. They embody it quietly. They don't need to dazzle anyone to remain visible. They retreat from superficial attention to protect what is sacred within them. They are less concerned with who they might attract and more with who they might become. That subtle shift makes people uneasy because the world wants urgency, wants attachment, wants the reassurance that nobody stands too far outside the expected line. But she has discovered something else: the power of her own company. The clarity that rises when she knows she doesn't have to accept anything just to avoid being alone. She's not lost in solitary living. She's aligned with it. She moves at a frequency where nothing is demanded, everything is chosen, and her worth is not negotiated. This is why people criticize her, why they question her motives, why they pick apart her decisions. It's not because she's wrong. It's because she doesn't fit their framework. They cannot understand the presence behind her apparent absence, the way she fills a room without trying, the way she challenges the emotional habits of a society built on constant distraction and superficial connections. She doesn't desire love that diminishes her. She wants love that expands her horizon, love that grows instead of grasps, love that speaks truth instead of fear. Until such a bond appears, if it appears, she stands steady, she stands whole. Maybe that sounds exaggerated to some. Maybe it sounds like pride, or avoidance, or one of those inspiring quotes plastered on Instagram. But deep beneath those doubts, there's another feeling, a question many don't voice out loud. What if choosing yourself first is the most honest path to real love? What if solitude isn't a void, but a doorway? The silence around a solitary woman is not a warning sign. It's a sanctuary. And those who have never built such a sanctuary confuse peace for coldness, intention for arrogance. What they fail to see is that she didn't raise these walls to push the world away. She raised them to keep herself intact, to prevent her spirit from leaking into people who do not know how to hold it, to ensure her sense of self never again becomes collateral damage in someone else's journey. Jung also wrote that whatever we avoid in ourselves, we inevitably project onto others. Perhaps that explains why some women interpret solitude as emptiness, because they've never explored their own inner territory, while others chase validation in external connections. This woman turned inward. She entered the corridors of her unconscious, faced old wounds she kept postponing, sat with fears she inherited, patterns she repeated, love she mistook for attachment. And there, in the quiet depths of herself, she grew. Her solitude isn't a wound, it's a healed scar, proof that she has walked through fire and returned with her own truth. She didn't give up on love. She just stopped confusing love with emotional scarcity. This woman has known chaos intimately. She has given until her edges blurred. She has loved until she disappeared in the reflection of someone else's needs. She has bent herself into shapes that weren't hers, just to keep the peace. And yes, she has begged, not for love, but for the bare minimum of mutual respect. Then piece by piece she woke up, not suddenly, but slowly, through disappointments that eventually became lessons instead of wounds, through losses that became doorways, through silence that became awareness. Now, what you call coldness is simply maturity. Maturity terrifies people because it demands depth, presence, and accountability. She no longer wants promises layered over uncertainty. She wants a presence rooted in truth. She wants reciprocity, not performance, authenticity, not emotional theatrics. This is why some find her unreachable, not because she's difficult, but because she's whole. And wholeness exposes the places where others are fragmented. When a woman becomes whole, she evokes two reactions: admiration from those who seek growth, and fear from those who avoid it. She doesn't want to complete anyone, nor to be completed. She wants a life shared with another whole human, not a patchwork of half-healed halves. Until that arrives, she remains devoted to her path, not out of stubbornness, but out of loyalty to her soul. She is not disappearing into solitude. She is preserving herself within it. There's a profound difference. But the world still clings to the idea that a woman alone is incomplete, that happiness exists only in pairs, that independence is suspicious. Jung believed that where collective norms rule, authenticity becomes rebellion, and this woman lives rebelliously in the most peaceful way possible, by remaining herself. She hears the comments, "You're too picky. You expect too much. You'll end up alone." And she smiles, not because she agrees, but because she remembers the years she accepted so little, the years she mistook crumbs for affection, inconsistency for passion, emotional chaos for romantic intensity. People call her standards too high, but she knows they're simply foundational, the bare minimum she has earned through introspection and pain. She seeks not perfection, but emotional maturity, not grand gestures, but grounded presence, not potential, but actuality. And that's rare, not because it's impossible, but because few people commit to the inner work that makes it possible. The discomfort she triggers in others isn't created by her behavior. It arises from what she symbolizes: the possibility of being fulfilled without external approval, the possibility of belonging to oneself. Men who rely on female insecurity feel threatened by her. Women who are still trapped in the search for validation feel judged by her existence alone. But she isn't here to threaten or judge. She's simply existing in her truth. And truth is a mirror. Those who look into it either admire their reflection or run from it. She doesn't rush. She doesn't operate on society's timeline. Her life is not a race toward marriage, motherhood, or validation. It unfolds at the pace of her awareness. And this frustrates a world obsessed with immediacy, gratification, and fast love. She wants depth in a world of performance. She wants presence in a world of distraction. She wants soul-level connection in a world chasing attention, like currency. When she says no, it's not manipulation. It's self-honoring. When she walks away, it's not dramatics. It's emotional intelligence. When she chooses a quiet evening over empty company, it's not pride. It's clarity. And that clarity, earned through years of inner excavation, is her revolution. She doesn't live to please. She lives to be. And that makes her dangerous, not to society, but to the systems of expectation that try to shape her. What unsettles people isn't her solitude. It's the serenity she finds in it. The way she seems untouched by the fear of being alone. The way she seems connected to something deeper, something internal. Jung famously said that those who look outward dream, but those who look inward awaken. And she is awake. Her awakening wasn't gentle. It was grueling. A stripping away of illusions. A confrontation with emotional habits she inherited from family, culture, and early heartbreaks. A dismantling of dependencies she once mistook for affection. She learned to define herself, not through the eyes of the world, but through her own. And that shift changed everything. She knows what it feels like to wonder if being alone is a failure. To feel the pressure of explaining why she doesn't have someone beside her. To question whether something is wrong with her. She lived through that doubt. But one day, she realized something revolutionary. It is better to be alone than to be unseen in a relationship. Better to walk solo than to walk with someone who diminishes her. Better to stand in truth than to stay in a bond that distorts her. That day, she made a vow, not to the world, but to herself. She would never again abandon herself for company. Her path isn't perfect. She still has nights of silence that feel heavy, days when memories resurface, moments of longing, nostalgia, or emotional fatigue. But her strength grows each time she chooses integrity over fear, each time she chooses peace over chaos, each time she chooses alignment over convenience. She discovered that real love does not bind or suffocate. It does not demand sacrifice of selfhood. The love she desires is spacious, liberating, supportive. A love that doesn't eclipse her identity, but amplifies it. Until such a love crosses her path, she grows into herself, not from pride, but from self-respect. She is the embodiment of individuation, the philosophical and psychological process of becoming whole. She met her shadow, entered her depths, wrestled with ancestral patterns, and emerged with her own truth forged in clarity. She no longer seeks someone to complete her. She seeks someone to evolve with. Someone who has walked their own inner landscape. Someone emotionally responsible, grounded, and present. But emotional responsibility is rare. Easy love is abundant. Deep love is scarce. Many people love from lack, from fear, from the desire to possess rather than to understand. So if she walks alone today, it's not a tragedy, it's a testament. Every step she takes carries wisdom. Every boundary she sets is an act of self-worth. Every silence she chooses is a refusal to settle. She doesn't need validation anymore. Her certainty comes from within, and that certainty radiates. It shifts the atmosphere around her. It changes the way people respond to her. Some are drawn to it. Some are intimidated by it. A woman who has rediscovered herself is powerful, not because she dominates, but because she is anchored. Her clarity is her strength. Her presence is her resistance. The woman who walks alone today is not the same one who once chased love at any cost. Something cracked open within her, and through that crack, she found her freedom. She learned that collapse can be a doorway, She learned that rock bottom can become a foundation. Jung said that a tree reaching toward the heavens must also send its roots deep into the darkness, and she has traveled through her darkness, faced the fears handed down by generations, confronted patterns that lived in the women before her, broke cycles that her ancestors never had the chance to break. She is the living disruption of those patterns. She no longer carries the responsibility of healing others. She no longer confuses caretaking with love. She no longer accepts affection that wounds her spirit. And when the world whispers that she is wrong for expecting more, she stays rooted. At first, she stood trembling. Then she stood aware. Now she stands unshakable. She learned to feed herself with quiet, to find warmth in her own presence. She isn't unreachable. She simply refuses to be invaded. There is a profound distinction between opening one's heart and surrendering it to erosion. She opens, but only to truth, only to sincerity, only to those who arrive without disguises. She has become fluent in the difference between presence and performance, between intention and impulse, between connection and attachment. Her intuition sharpens with every boundary she holds. Her energy is her filter. She can sense shallowness before a word is spoken. She can feel misalignment like a change in temperature. And she does not hesitate to remove herself from environments that dull her spirit. Her transformation is not surface level. It is archetypal, ancient, as if she tapped into a memory older than her lifetime. The memory that women were never meant to be defined by service, but by expression, not designed to shrink for love, but to expand within it. And in accessing that memory, something wild awakened in her. A woman unbound, a woman intuitive, a woman emotionally sovereign, a woman who may stand alone, but is far from lonely, a woman who chooses herself, not as a last resort, but as a beginning. Yet the world rarely understands a woman who belongs to herself. It fears her in ways it cannot articulate, because a self-possessed woman cannot be swayed by fear, guilt, or pressure. She cannot be manipulated through shame or expectation. She cannot be controlled through the old tools society once relied upon. And when she no longer bends to those forces, she becomes unpredictable, not to herself, but to the systems that built themselves around her silence. It is easier to label such a woman difficult than it is to examine why her independence feels threatening. Easier to accuse her of arrogance than to admit that her self-respect exposes the lack of it in others. Easier to call her alone as if it were a flaw than to acknowledge that many people only avoid solitude because they fear what they would hear in the quiet. She understands that many people rush into relationships not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of themselves, fear of their thoughts, fear of their past, fear of confronting the parts of their soul that ache in the dark. But she has already done that work. She has met her shadows. She has walked the landscape of her own mind. She has confronted the parts of herself that others are terrified to acknowledge. That is why she's not afraid of solitude. Solitude is not her exile. It's her initiation. She knows that solitude reveals what company often conceals: your true values, your hidden beliefs, your unmet needs. The quiet teaches you who you are without external influence. And when she emerged from that quiet, she carried a self-knowledge so strong that most surface-level relationships no longer felt compatible. She can't pretend anymore. She can't dilute herself to make others comfortable. She can't shrink to fit into dynamics that require her invisibility. Authenticity has left her unable to tolerate anything less. A woman who has faced herself becomes the one thing society doesn't know how to handle. She becomes her own authority. Her choices are not dictated by fear of judgment. Her desires are not shaped by cultural timelines. Her self-worth is not dependent on romantic validation. This level of autonomy disrupts an entire culture that still believes a woman is incomplete until someone claims her. But she belongs to no one, and she never will again. Her independence is not a rebellion, it's a reclamation, a remembering, a return to the truth that women have always carried, but were taught to suppress. This is why people project onto her, why they assume she must be bitter or heartbroken or secretly longing for someone. They can't imagine a woman choosing herself because they have never tasted that level of internal abundance. They assume loneliness because they don't understand wholeness. She no longer tries to explain herself. She no longer entertains questions that reduce her existence to a relational status. She no longer adjusts her path to soothe the insecurities of others. Her life is not a public debate. Her choices are not a performance. She lives with a sense of quiet dignity, not because she believes she is above others, but because she finally understands the gravity of her own spirit. Her solitude is not accidental, it is intentional, and intentional solitude is the birthplace of inner power. She spends her time nurturing what many people neglect: her creativity, her intuition, her emotional intelligence, her sense of purpose. She invests in the parts of herself that cannot be taken, stolen, or diminished. She's not running from intimacy, she's refining it. The truth is, she is not difficult to love. She simply refuses to be loved poorly. She is not impossible to reach. She simply no longer accepts half-effort attempts. She is not too much. She has simply discovered how much she is worth. And once a woman realizes her worth, she becomes selective with everything, not out of superiority, but out of alignment. She realizes that not all company is companionship. Not all affection is care. Not all relationships are connections. She is willing to wait rather than settle, willing to grow rather than cling, willing to walk alone rather than walk with someone who diminishes her. Because settling is another form of self-abandonment, and she has done enough of that in the past. When she finally stepped into her truth, something profound shifted inside her. Her spirit no longer tolerated the emotional fragments she once accepted. Her heart stopped confusing intensity with intimacy. Her mind no longer rationalized behavior rooted in insecurity and immaturity. Her soul rejected anything that did not match her growth. This is why she appears intimidating, not because she is harsh, but because she is honest. Not because she is unyielding, but because she is self-aware. Not because she is unapproachable, but because she recognizes misalignment instantly. A woman who knows herself becomes the clearest mirror someone else will ever face. She exposes, through her presence alone, whether someone is ready to meet her, not at her surface, but at her depth. And that kind of depth is terrifying for those who have never explored their own. People who are used to half-hearted connections cannot understand her devotion to authenticity. People who survive on emotional shortcuts cannot understand her commitment to inner work. People who fear their own silence cannot understand her comfort within it. She is not living in resistance to love. She is living in devotion to truth. And if a relationship ever enters her life again, it will be a byproduct of alignment, not desperation. It will be a meeting of two complete individuals, not two incomplete halves, searching for a missing piece. She knows that the love she seeks cannot be found by chasing. It can only be met by becoming. So she becomes. Every day she becomes more herself, more grounded, more intuitive, more unwavering. People look at her life and assume she is alone, but she is not. She is accompanied by the parts of herself she once abandoned. She is supported by the wisdom she gained through hardship. She is guided by the intuition she once ignored. She is surrounded by the peace that comes from choosing the right absence over the wrong presence. And that kind of life confuses those who believe fulfillment only comes through another person. Her life is not lacking. It is intentional. It is deliberate. It is sovereign. But sovereignty comes with a cost. There are days when she misses what she once thought love should feel like. Not the relationship itself, but the dream of it. There are nights when the silence stretches too wide. Moments when she wonders whether her standards are too high, or whether she's being unrealistic in a world overflowing with emotional chaos. But these moments don't break her. They refine her. They remind her of the path she has chosen. A path of consciousness, not convenience. A path that demands she never betray herself again. She knows that love without awareness becomes attachment. Love without boundaries becomes sacrifice. Love without growth becomes repetition. So she waits, not passively, but with purpose. Her waiting is not stillness. It's preparation. It's cultivation. It's the strengthening of a foundation that will one day support something extraordinary. She waits because she knows that a relationship built on truth cannot be rushed. She waits because she knows that becoming the person who can love deeply is more important than finding someone to love quickly. She waits because she knows that temporary companionship is not worth abandoning long-term peace. Many misunderstand her waiting as stubbornness, but waiting rooted in self-awareness is not stubborn. It is sacred. She rebuilds herself in that waiting. She expands her inner world. She travels into ideas, passions, creativity, solitude. She pours into her dreams instead of pouring into someone unprepared to hold her. Every day she spends alone is a day she spends becoming. And becoming is never wasted time. A woman who evolves alone becomes a woman who cannot be dominated. She becomes a woman who cannot be bought with attention. She becomes a woman who cannot be manipulated through insecurity. She becomes a woman who demands presence, because she offers presence. She becomes a woman who requires emotional intelligence, because she practices emotional intelligence. And eventually, she becomes a woman whose life is so full of purpose, peace, and self-understanding that only a soul of equal depth can step beside her. This is not arrogance. It is alignment, because she is not searching for someone to complete her. She is searching for someone who complements her, someone who doesn't dim her fire, but walks with their own, someone who doesn't fear her depth, but brings depth of their own, someone who doesn't cling to her light, but shines beside her. A person like that doesn't come often, and she is willing to wait. Because once a woman chooses herself, she doesn't negotiate her worth. Once she tastes inner peace, she refuses emotional chaos. Once she becomes whole, she never again agrees to become half. And that is why her path, though solitary, is powerful. She is not a woman without love. She is a woman who refuses to settle for counterfeit love. She is not a woman without connection. She is a woman who seeks connection rooted in consciousness, not convenience. She is not a woman without companionship. She is a woman who believes companionship should be chosen, not escaped into. Her solitude is not the absence of love. It is the cultivation of self-love. Her independence is not the rejection of intimacy. It is the foundation for authentic intimacy. Her strength is not the denial of vulnerability. It is vulnerability refined through wisdom. One day, someone will meet her, not the idea of her, but her real self. Someone who has also walked through their own depths. Someone who has met their shadow and integrated it. Someone who understands emotional responsibility, not as a burden, but as a privilege. When that day comes, she will not surrender her independence. She will share it. She will not shrink to belong. She will expand in alignment. She will not lose herself in love. She will find another dimension of it. But until then, she chooses herself. And there is nothing more powerful than a woman who makes that choice, not out of fear, but out of truth.